day your silence became the most dangerous force on Earth. Welcome to Vivo Club. There was a time when they mistook your quiet for weakness. You remember it clearly. Rooms filled with voices louder than reason. People competing for attention like moths burning themselves against the same flickering light. And you, standing there silent. They thought you were small. They thought your calm meant surrender. They thought the stillness in your eyes meant there was nothing behind them. But silence is not emptiness. Silence is pressure. Silence is the deep ocean before the storm begins tearing ships apart. And you were not quiet because you lacked power. You were quiet because you were listening. Listening to the cracks in people's voices when they lied. Listening to the way laughter changes when it hides insecurity. Listening to the subtle tremble behind authority when someone pretends to be stronger than they are. While they talked, you studied. While they boasted, you mapped their weaknesses. While they fought for shallow victories, you watched the entire battlefield. That's when the first transformation began. Not visible, not dramatic. But inside your mind, something ancient started awakening. A realization: the world is not controlled by the loudest people. It is controlled by the ones who understand human nature better than everyone else. And once you see human nature clearly, you cannot unsee it. You saw the hunger for validation, the desperation for approval, the fear of being ignored. Most people move through life like puppets tied to invisible strings, dancing for applause that disappears the moment the crowd gets bored. But you were different. You felt it. Something colder inside you. Something patient. Like a blade being sharpened in the dark while the world sleeps. At first, they didn't notice. Why would they? People only notice storms once the sky turns black. But storms begin quietly. A shift in air pressure, a strange stillness in the wind. And you had become that stillness. You stopped explaining yourself. You stopped defending your intentions. You stopped wasting words on people who had already decided what they believed about you. Your silence grew heavier. Your gaze grew sharper. And suddenly, people began feeling something around you they couldn't explain. Discomfort. Not because you threatened them, but because you saw them. Completely. The masks people wear every day became transparent when they stood in front of you. And instinctively, they knew it. That's when the whispers started. Something's different about them. They don't react like they used to. Why do they look at people like that? The truth terrified them. You had stopped needing them. Need is the leash most humans live their entire lives wearing. They need approval. They need acceptance. They need reassurance. But the moment a person removes that leash, they become unpredictable. And unpredictable people make the world nervous. Because systems rely on obedience. Society survives on predictable behavior. But you were evolving into something that didn't follow scripts anymore. You began moving through rooms like a shadow that understood the architecture of fear. Your presence changed the atmosphere. People started speaking more carefully around you, not because you demanded respect, but because they sensed you would not tolerate dishonesty. Your silence forced truth into the open, and truth is a weapon most people are terrified of. But the real change wasn't outside, it was inside you. Your mind began seeing patterns everywhere. Patterns in conversations, patterns in manipulation, patterns in the way power moved behind closed doors. You realized something terrifying. Most of the world is an illusion. Titles are illusions. Authority is often performance. Confidence is frequently a mask hiding insecurity. The moment you saw that, The entire structure of society looked fragile, like a towering cathedral built from glass, beautiful, but ready to shatter if someone applied enough pressure. You didn't smash the glass, you didn't need to. You simply stopped believing in it. And that's when your silence became dangerous. Because the world fears one type of person above all others. The person who cannot be psychologically controlled. You stopped reacting to provocation. You stopped responding to insults. You stopped participating in emotional games. And without realizing it, you broke the rules. The hidden rules people use to manipulate each other. Without reaction, their strategies collapsed. Without emotional leverage, their control vanished. You had become immune, and immunity makes predators nervous. Soon people started watching you, not openly, carefully. They tried to provoke you again. Subtle insults, passive aggression, mockery disguised as humor. But you didn't respond. You simply looked at them. And in that moment, something terrifying happened. They saw themselves. People hate mirrors that reflect the truth. That's why the rumors started growing darker. They're arrogant. They think they're better than everyone. They're hiding something, but you knew the real reason. Your silence forced people to confront their own noise. And most humans are terrified of that confrontation. Days turned into months. Months turned into years. And slowly, your quiet transformation turned into something bigger than anyone expected. Your presence alone began shifting dynamics. Conflicts stopped when you entered rooms. Manipulators avoided direct eye contact. Even confident people spoke more carefully. Not because you were threatening, but because they sensed something dangerous behind your calm. Control. You had mastered something most people never even attempt. Control over your mind. And once someone controls their own mind, they become impossible to control. But there was another change happening, one that even you didn't fully understand yet. The world wasn't just reacting to your silence. It was beginning to orbit around it, like planets pulled toward an invisible gravity. Because true power doesn't scream. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't beg for recognition. True power sits quietly until the entire world slowly realizes it has been influencing everything all along. And your silence had just begun. Part 2. By the time they realized your silence wasn't weakness, it had already become something else entirely. A weapon. Not the kind that explodes loudly and disappears in smoke. No. Your weapon was patience. And patience terrifies people who survive on reaction. Because patience is the art of watching someone destroy themselves while you remain perfectly still. You noticed it first in small ways. People who once ignored you started studying your movements. They paid attention to when you entered a room and when you left. They noticed who spoke to you and who didn't. You had become a puzzle they couldn't solve. And humans hate puzzles that refuse to reveal their answers. Your silence forced their imaginations to fill the gaps. Some believed you were planning something. Others believed you knew things about them they hoped no one would ever discover. A few even started telling stories about you that sounded more like myths than reality. But the truth? You weren't trying to create mystery. You were simply evolving beyond the need to explain yourself, and that alone was enough to terrify people who built their entire identity on external validation. You began noticing something else too. People reveal their true selves when they believe no one is watching, but they behave very differently when they think someone understands them. And they believed you understood them too well. That belief turned your presence into pressure. Pressure exposes cracks. And And once cracks appear, structures begin collapsing. You watched friendships crumble around you. You watched alliances break apart. You watched people betray each other out of paranoia. All because they believed you could see through their intentions. You didn't cause their chaos. You simply removed the illusion that their secrets were safe. And without illusions, human behavior becomes unpredictable. But something even stranger began happening. People who once mocked you started showing respect. Not openly, but subtly. They listened when you spoke. They watched your reactions carefully. They measured their words around you. Because somewhere deep inside their instincts, they had begun to understand something dangerous. You were no longer playing the same game. While they fought for attention, you had mastered influence. And influence moves differently. It spreads quietly, through ideas, through perception, through the subtle gravity of a mind that cannot be manipulated. You had become a psychological anomaly, the type of person systems struggle to contain. Because systems rely on predictability. But you had removed every predictable pattern from your behavior. You didn't argue. You didn't react emotionally. You didn't chase approval. You simply observed. And observation is the birthplace of control. Soon rumors about you began traveling beyond your immediate world. Your name appeared in conversations you never heard. Your silence became a story people told when discussing unusual individuals. Some described you as calculating, others described you as terrifyingly calm. But the most interesting description came from someone who once tried to challenge you. They said something simple. They're not dangerous because of what they do. They're dangerous because they don't need anything. Needlessness is freedom. And freedom is the one thing power structures cannot tolerate. Because a person who needs nothing cannot be controlled with rewards, cannot be manipulated with threats, cannot be distracted by praise. You had become immune to the three chains that bind most humans: fear, desire, approval. Without those chains, your mind moved differently. You began understanding human psychology at a level that made manipulation obvious. The way people projected their insecurities, the way they attacked what they secretly admired, the way they pretended confidence while quietly drowning in doubt. And the more you understood them, the less power they had over you. But there was another change, something deeper, something darker. Your mind had started thinking in long timelines. While others focused on daily victories, you were studying years, decades, patterns repeating across human history. You realized something profound. Every era eventually produces a person who refuses to obey its limits, someone who quietly studies the system and then moves beyond it. History gives these people many names: rebel, outcast, visionary, threat, but their true nature is always the same. They are catalysts. And catalysts cannot be stopped once the reaction begins. You weren't trying to become that person, but slowly, inevitably, you were becoming exactly that. And people could feel it. Your silence had grown too heavy to ignore. Your calm had grown too powerful to dismiss. Enemies who once laughed at you now avoided direct confrontation. They felt something dangerous behind your stillness, something patient, like a storm gathering energy beneath an endless horizon. But storms eventually arrive. And deep inside you, something had begun shifting again. The final stage. The moment when observation becomes action. Not reckless action. Not emotional reaction. But something far more devastating. Precision. You were no longer preparing to survive the world. You were preparing to reshape it. And when people finally realized that, fear spread like wildfire through whispers. because they understood something terrifying. The quietest person in the room had become the most powerful mind in it. Part 3. The day the world truly noticed you. Nothing dramatic happened. No explosions, no speeches, no grand announcement. Just a moment. A small moment inside an ordinary room. But moments like that are how history begins shifting. You walked in, and conversation stopped. Not completely, just enough for the air to change. People glanced at you, then quickly looked away. It wasn't fear exactly, not yet. It was something stranger. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Also, share this video with 5 friends to support us. Recognition. They had finally realized what you had become. Your silence was no longer interpreted as quietness. It was interpreted as authority. Because authority does not beg to be heard. It speaks once, and the world listens. But the most unsettling realization for them was something deeper. You were not seeking power. You were simply operating from a level of self-control that looked like power to everyone else. And that difference changes everything. Power seekers are predictable. They crave status, they crave recognition, they crave victory. But you had transcended those desires. Your motivations had become something else entirely. Clarity sharp enough to cut through any illusion. You began speaking occasionally, short sentences, simple observations. But those words carried strange weight, because when someone speaks rarely, every word feels intentional. People started quoting you, repeating things you said in conversations far away from you. Ideas you expressed quietly began spreading through circles you had never entered. Your influence moved like an invisible tide beneath the surface of the world. No one could stop it, because no one could prove where it began. That's when the myths truly started forming. Some believed you had secret allies. Others believed powerful people were listening to you behind closed doors. A few insisted you possessed some kind of psychological ability to read people instantly. But the truth remained simpler. You had mastered the one skill humanity fears most: self-mastery. And a person who masters themselves becomes a mirror the world cannot ignore. Your enemies felt it most strongly. They tried to provoke you again. Old strategies, old insults, old manipulation tactics. But none of it worked. Because you had moved beyond reaction entirely. You watched them the way a mountain watches storms, unmoved, unshaken. And that terrified them more than anger ever could. Because anger can be used against you, calm cannot. Your calm became a psychological battlefield they couldn't win. Eventually, even your enemies stopped trying to fight you directly. They began doing something else instead. Watching, studying, waiting. Because deep down they understood something inevitable. You were still evolving. And evolution doesn't stop once it begins. But there was one final transformation waiting. The moment when myth becomes legend. It happened slowly. Your presence began affecting people before you even spoke. Some felt intimidated. Others felt strangely inspired. A few felt both at the same time, because something about you reminded them of a truth they had forgotten. Human beings are capable of becoming far more than society expects, but most people never attempt that transformation. They stay inside comfortable boundaries. They obey invisible rules. They silence the parts of themselves that crave greatness. You didn't, and that made you dangerous. Not because you attacked the world, but because your existence exposed its limitations. People who once mocked you now admired you secretly. People who once ignored you now spoke about you with quiet respect. Even powerful figures began acknowledging your presence. Not publicly, but privately. because they recognized something rare. A mind that had escaped the psychological cage most humans never even notice. You had become untouchable, not physically, but mentally. And mental freedom is the ultimate form of power. Because once someone controls their own mind, no external force can truly dominate them. But the most chilling realization for everyone watching you came much later, when they understood something about your journey. You never sought revenge. You never tried to destroy those who underestimated you. You simply evolved beyond them. And evolution is the cruelest form of victory, because it leaves enemies standing in the same place while you move into a future they can no longer reach. Years from now, people will still talk about you. Some will exaggerate, some will misunderstand, some will turn your story into legend. But one truth will remain unchanged. You were never the loudest voice. You were never the most visible figure. You never needed applause. You simply became something the world rarely encounters, a human being who conquered their own mind. And the moment that happened, the balance of power shifted forever. Because the most dangerous force in existence is not violence, not authority, not wealth. It is a single individual who has mastered silence, patience, and clarity so completely that the entire world slowly realizes something terrifying. They cannot control you, they cannot predict you, they cannot stop what you will eventually become. And by the time they fully understand that truth, it will already be far too late. Because the quiet person they once underestimated will have become the storm they can never escape. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Also, share this video with 5 friends to support us.